In the last video, I showed you how to create this lesson template using the author lesson function. And now I'm going to show you how to replace the default text that appears here in our template with content of your own so that you can create your own interactive content for Swirl. So essentially, a lesson in Swirl is composed of a series of what we call units of instruction. And units of instruction are separated by these three dashes, followed by a tag that specifies what type of unit of instruction it is. And so examples of units of instruction are like a block of text that appears to the user. Another example is a question that requires the user to enter some R command at the prompt. We call that a command question. And then another unit of instruction is a multiple choice question. And there are others, but in this video I'm just going to keep the example very simple, and I'll give you an example of each of these in succession. And then ultimately you can extend this example as far as you'd like, creating full lessons and then courses, which are composed of series of lessons, all on your own. So let's begin with the block of text here, and since we called this this particular lesson Basic Arithmetic in R, maybe we can recycle some of the default text that I've used here. But we'll just tell the user that in R you can use the sum function to add multiple numbers together. And I've just gotten in the habit of enclosing anything that looks like an R expression in these backticks. And the backtick key is usually on the top left of your keyboard, just above the tab key. One thing that's nice is in the R Markdown format, and particularly in RStudio, you'll get this syntax highlighting because this has special meaning in R Markdown. But the real reason that I use these backticks is just to distinguish this R expression from the rest of the text that makes up this content. So that's totally optional and up to you. That's just been my convention. This will appear to the user, and then the user will press return to advance to the next unit of instruction. So in this command question, let's say that we'd like to ask the user to maybe sum three numbers and then store them in a new variable. So let's say use the sum function to add the numbers 3, 5, and 9, and store the result in a variable called mySum. Great. So now we can come down here, and this is what's called a code chunk in R Markdown. Again, this has special meaning if you are using R Markdown for its intended purpose, which we are not. But R Markdown's intended purpose is to populate an HTML file for the web. We are just using it as a convenient means of weaving plain text with R code, and you can see that again in RStudio you're getting this nice syntax highlighting when you create a code chunk. And so let's just go ahead and get rid of what's in here. And what goes in the code chunk is a valid R expression that will correctly answer this question. So notice I'm choosing my words carefully. It's not necessarily the only correct way to answer a question, because in R, if you're familiar with R, there's often many ways to do the same thing. And depending on how much leeway you give to the student, they might solve the problem many different ways. But this importantly will solve the question correctly, so that let's say they decide to skip the question, Swirl will actually input this answer on their behalf so that they can continue on with the lesson. All right, so we'll do mySum gets sum, and then now let's just double check over here so we can use the console while we're authoring our lesson. let's see if this will work. Sum 17. Okay, so I can never keep it straight. You know, whether you need to say like sum and then give it a vector of numbers, or if you can just do you know, any number of numeric arguments here. And so I guess that works, so let's go ahead and use that. And we can actually just run that in the console. All right, so we get my sum. There we go. So you can test it as you're going along. And we want to show a hint to the user if they get the question wrong. So maybe we'll say, remember to use the sum function and include all three numbers as arguments. Okay, so maybe we want to be more specific. If this is up to you, maybe you would even just give them the correct answer. It's really completely up to you, whatever you feel is best. And then in the answer tests, so I should say for now, I'm going to have you actually delete the answer text section because we're just making a simple example here. Now, wonderful thing about Swirl is that you can be very specific with how you would like to evaluate the student's answer for any particular question. You might say, I want to make sure they create a new variable. I want to make sure the name of that variable is my sum. I'd like to make sure that the result, the value that they get is 17, which is the sum of those three numbers. Maybe I want to make sure that they use the sum function, but I don't want to specify exactly how I'd like them to do this. And so you can give them varying degrees of leeway in how they respond to a question. In this particular example, we're just going to require that they answer the question the way that I've answered it here. And so what happens is when you delete this answer tests portion, Swirl's going to use the default test in this case, which will just match this expression against their own expression to make sure that they are in fact the same. And it will be robust to things like this, so if maybe they enter it with no spaces, that's okay. It'll still evaluate it the same way. But let's say that they decided to include a vector. This will not be the identical expression, so that'll evaluate them as being incorrect. Okay, so again, just because I'm making a simple example here, we're gonna use the default answer tests, and then when we have more documentation on the different methods of answer testing in the future, you can go ahead and add layers of complexity down the road as you'd like. All right, so moving on here. We've got our hint, and so we're good to go on the command question. Now let's move on to our multiple choice question. So let's ask the user, we'll just be very straightforward here. What is the name of the function used in R to sum multiple numbers? All right, I hope they can get this one. And we've already conveniently, because of the template that I've got, we've got some answer choices that'll work here. We could add one more if we wanted. So we could say like apply. All right, and you can actually have as many choices as you'd like there. Now, the way that you specify which one is the correct response to a multiple choice question is you put these underscores on either side of the answer. And I've just am in the habit of always putting the correct answer first. That's actually not necessary. You could put it anywhere in here. But the reason I do it first is because when we output multiple choice questions to the user, the answers are automatically randomized. So even though it's first here, it will not always be first when the user sees it. So this just helps me keep it straight. All right, and then you'll notice these are just numbered with numbers, period, space, and the correct answer. And again, I'm just including backticks here to denote that these are our expressions. If you think that would be confusing, you could get rid of these backticks and it would work just the same. All right, and then finally, we also want a hint here, and actually, I think the hint that I've got here will work just fine. and we'll just get rid of that. So the function name is synonymous with addition. All right, sum. There we go. So we can save this now, and then in the next video, I'm going to show you how to actually load this lesson into your local installation of Swirl. And then ultimately, you can share this with as many people as you'd like, and we'll show you ways to do that as well.